Hey guys, welcome back. It's Friday. You're sitting on the spotlight exclusive to the hashtag MagnaOnAir digital network, magnasearchgroup.tv. We have a special guest in the studio with us today, Dan Novias from Chicago. He is an entrepreneur, CEO, business leader, contributor to Forbes. He started his first company at the age of 15 years old. And he's got a lot of value to bring our audience today. Welcome to the studio, Dan.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Dan, tell our viewers a little bit about your story. I mean, you're young, you're successful, to guide us through sort of your beginnings and where you are now.
Yeah. So if we go really far back, I've been an entrepreneur without even knowing that I was an entrepreneur right when I was a kid. I feel like it's like a common theme among many. So I was the kid that was, I'd be hustling Pokemon cards and, getting in trouble for that type of stuff. And then I moved on to like Playboy magazines, actually, right? So I'm originally from Brazil.
Lucrative when you're 12.
Right. So I was like in like 4th or 5th grade. Yeah. And I remember, so being from Brazil, like here we had all these rules, like you have to be 18 and, to buy these things. In Brazil, if you have the money, you can just get it, right? So then I'd bring it back and I'd rip a page out and I'd sell it to kids for like $20, right? So I made like $300 doing that. And then this one kid stole money from his parents. And that's how I got caught. And ultimately I got like, I kind of got in trouble. I mean, I definitely got in trouble for it, but it wasn't like, I wasn't really doing it with the intention of like being like, I was just like, dude, I'm just making some money, right? Yeah. And my parents, like, it's kind of one of those things where it's like one of those moments where I feel like your parents are kind of like pissed because, my dad's like, well, now people are going to think those are my Playboys, which is kind of odd. But they're also kind of proud, I think, at the same time because like, wow, look, this kid's like, taking his own initiative to like do his own thing.
Early in the export business, early entrance into the export business. So
yeah. So when I was 15, I decided to get a job at in like a polo store at the time, and it started out as like an eBay business because I was working at the store and I was like, this is horrible, right? And I was about to quit after like 3 days, and I remember seeing all these people like walk in the door, and I was like, man, what I need to do is be polo, right? That's what I could do, but that's like and for a 15-year-old, it's a bit too much. But I did have this great discount at this company at the time, and I started using my discount to sell items on eBay, right? And I did that for like 5 months and I made about $30,000 doing that. And that was like kind of the starting capital that I had to start this export business because obviously that's not sustainable to use that, right? But you have to get your start somewhere. Yeah. So what I started doing then was I noticed that in Brazil, the being between those two countries whole life is that there's a opportunity between and consumer goods. So basically something like an iPhone here costs $200 to plan. The same phone in Brazil costs $800 to plan. And there's typically a 6-month lag that comes between these two or these products, right? From when it comes out in America and comes out in the rest of the country. I found this to be true all over European Union. So I ended up setting up a warehouse there through a guy that I basically was like, I'll give you my costs if you help me distribute product throughout like from London through all these other countries in Europe. And then I moved to Australia when I was in college and did a similar thing there. So I ultimately started out with like $1,000, from when I started that random eBay business. And by the time I was a freshman in college, I had a much more full-fledged business that was generating a couple $1 million a year in revenue. Wow. From, essentially starting in my parents' basement, then moved into my dorm room as a college student. But what that allowed me to do was, you start somewhere and then you kind of like graduate as you go as an entrepreneur, right? So I didn't have to do the bullshit that I was doing, when I was 15, selling random clothes, like, with a discount. That's not logical, but like I didn't have anywhere else to take that money from, right? And if you're like living in a gray area for a period of time, like that's fine. But you have to see like, what is the end goal? So once I created that business though, then I moved on to several other companies. In college, I did like a screen printing business that, was basically making all the shirts and apparel for a lot of the fraternities and houses on campus. I started a music website that today is still in operation. It does about 20 million impressions a month. But basically, that's what ended up getting me into the app industry of what I'm in today. So the site that I started in college was getting about 2 million people a month on just listening to my music playlists, right? And it was before Spotify kind of like, got super popular. It was around 2010, 2011. And at the time it was like 80/20 is our breakdown between desktop and mobile. So we basically, I was like, I'm going to go make an app for this site. And my website took about 3 days for me to make with WordPress, and people were quoting me like $100K for an app, and I thought that was ridiculous.
Wow.
So when I left college, I was kind of looking for my next thing, and I was running around this site, and then I was like, well, maybe I'm going to be the WordPress of apps. That's what I'm going to create. So my co-founder and I met each other. Of all places, like Fiverr, right? I don't know if you guys know that site.
Yeah.
So that's what is really, it was serendipitously we met that way, right? Because I wouldn't say that you should meet your co-founder on Fiverr, or you shouldn't, right? I mean, I'm just saying it's highly improbable. But I met this guy, and he was only 17 years old, and we built this like really shitty product at the beginning. But it was good enough to get these 25,000 people on it to at least like prove that, because a lot of the times in entrepreneurship, it's not about the question of your ability to necessarily do something. It's more about the faith that you have in yourself to complete that, because everything's going against you. Yeah. And the people that keep powering through it are the people that end up making it through. So in any case, we built this product, and then we had like a tough time like monetizing it, because all of these features that we promised people we didn't actually have built. So, but we saw like, on the other end, we were like, oh, wow, this is like really, we built this really cool internal tool that we can rapidly make apps with. So we were like, let's just make our own apps. So we started making in a weekend, we made 60 apps. It was like juice diet apps, workout music apps, a bunch of like kind of bullshit apps, right? And then we put them in the store and published them. And then I went back to my roots, right? So this is like where you kind of learn things along the way. When you do several different businesses, you start picking up things. So I thought about, so what's the hardest part? Like, people think the hardest part about an app is making the app. Actually, the hardest part is the marketing, because people finding out about what the app is and to make money. So what I decided to do is take a totally different approach. I remembered back to my roots of, okay, in Brazil, the average income a month is $300, right? And if a person's making $300 a month, and someone buys an $800 iPhone, what does that mean about the person that bought the $800 iPhone? He's the top 1% of the entire country, right? Yeah. So 2 years ago, 2-3 years ago, when the Facebook advertising had just come out for mobile and apps, like the algorithms really hadn't caught up yet, because these algorithms are still considering Brazil a tier 3 country, right? Along with all these other countries where this holds true. So what I started doing is I started marketing only to iPhone users in these countries. And I was paying 1/10 of a cent of a click to get those people, but I'm dealing with the top 1% of the country, and I know that I'm dealing with them because I know they have money, right? Yeah. Whereas here, everyone has an iPhone. You don't know if they're rich or poor, if they're going to buy, if they're
less
not.
Qualified, yeah.
Exactly. So I have the most qualified leads ever, and I'm doing this in 30 different countries. So these apps that I spent like an hour to make started making $2,000-$3,000 a day. Wow. Number one in categories, because then they'd be like the number one app in music. Wow. And then I get all these random people just organically searching the App Store charts to also download my app. So then I'd like supplement $150, $200 a day per country or whatever. And sometimes it was as little as like 30 if you're like dealing with a country like Bolivia or something. But in any case, and then basically the organics just outweigh it, and it keeps it at the top of the charts. So we did that, and that's kind of, so then we went from making like $0 to making like, 40 or 50,000 a month, and then we would take that money and funnel it back into the product in hopes that we were going to make a good product. But then we kind of kept that model. It was like an 80-20 split. 80% of the time we were focusing on our product, 20% of the time we were focusing on money-making opportunities. And the money-making opportunities, one of them, we created this one app called InstaLiker, which was like our biggest app that we ever had made. We made it in about 6 days. With my, then 18-year-old co-founder, and we make this app in 6 days, and it was it blew up. It was literally making $25,000 every single day. It was the 71st highest grossing app in the App Store, in front of like Wall Street Journal and Dropbox, and it was incredible, right? Wow. Because and it was like partially luck. And partially, like, it's more like preparation meets opportunity, right? And those are the type of things, because, at that point we had built like a really good viral loop, and the product wasn't amazing, but like, we filled the need in the market. And granted, it wasn't like, the best need I've ever seen. At the end of the day, it was an Instagram liking app, for that feeds the vagueness of society. And I'm totally aware of that.
That's a money-making machine these days. It's vanity.
Yeah, it's vanity. But, the thing is, the way I look at it is, people, you can look at it as two ways. Oh, okay, you created an Instagram liking app and whatever. And it's not that like that's my life's work. But the way I look at it is, these things that I've had to do, I wouldn't be in the position I am today with a company that, what we're doing today, I think could revolutionize a lot of the things in the mobile industry. Wow. And we have 20 some employees, and those people's families and all the products that we have created and the people's lives that we've touched, I wouldn't have been able to get to that point without doing these other things first, right? So you have to always see what is the end game, and everything has to help you, because ultimately your life is very similar to like what a video game, right? Oh, yeah. You do a lot of bullshit in level 1, and then you upgrade and you get to level 2, and now you don't have to do a lot of this shit that you used to do there, because now you're capable of doing more. And people sometimes try and jump way too far ahead when they're not even ready to conquer like level 1 yet. You know what I'm saying? So that's the way I kind of take entrepreneurship. And now I think where I'm at in my life is, this is common with a lot of entrepreneurs. You have like this shiny object syndrome, and I have that in like tenfold, where it's like I see something and I get involved with it, and then I start too many businesses. I've started like 5 different companies, and then I'm like, man, I'm spreading myself way too thin. Or then I'll spend like a weekend on like some growth hack that I'm like, this is an incredible growth hack, I can't believe this. And then I'll spend, before I knew it, I've dumped in 10 hours of my time on that, and then I'm like, this is like what is I feel like sometimes like what makes me why I've learned so much as an entrepreneur, but also what sometimes holds me back. So now what I'm trying to do is like really focus in on just one thing and putting all of my effort and into one thing to make something great and not make something good.
Yeah, because you've been involved in a lot of different things, right? You've got a lot of companies that you're running right now. Due to your past successes, has that created all of these opportunities for yourself?
Yeah, most definitely. I think that if without doing those things first, like I feel like I at least have a foundation on what I'm doing, right? And then ultimately, you use a lot of the things that you learn from these different businesses. I've ran everything from like, a clothing business to e-commerce business to like a media business to even like a manufacturing product, right? Like I manufactured a product from ideation all the way to like retail store, and you learn like a lot of stuff that you end up reusing in these different types of businesses. So that is extremely valuable, and I can't really put a price on that. But it's also the capital that you gain with every business that might be successful. Because if I have to put up like sometimes it's a struggle for people even to put up say $25,000 to test out an idea or test out a business, and that's a reality that we face. Like all of us face. I'm in the middle of a fundraise now, but if I didn't have the initial capital to even put it in the first place, that'd be a big setback. Like you can't, you either raise money from investors or you figure out yourself. And for me, we recently raised around like, a year and a half ago, and now we're raising another one. But before then I had never raised any outside money. So it was like really like, okay, how do I figure out to do this? And it's incredible being a bootstrapping entrepreneur, because you learn how to make $1. And then but now it's like, when I started raising money, I was like, okay, I have to come up with a balance, because sometimes when you are bootstrapping, you're being really frugal, and sometimes that being really too frugal actually holds you back. Yeah. So it's like this, I feel like you have to have this incredible balance between the two in order to be a really successful entrepreneur.
And you need the funds to pay for talent, right? That's what it comes down to. Like you can only pay for talent if you have the money. Because these people these days can pick and choose where they want to work, where they want to go, and unless you have a foundation of solid developers that want to build the next greatest application.
How was that transition going from, basically building your own capital off of your own side businesses to now going to fundraisers and asking investors for money? How have you adjusted to that transition? Because, a lot of people, maybe have great ideas, but they might not have the selling skills or the communication skills to really communicate that. You clearly do, as a young entrepreneur, but how is that transition into, asking these investment firms or, if any investors in general?
Yeah. What's the secret?
Yeah.
The secret, man, if I knew.
Well, what's worked for you? What's worked for you? What hasn't worked for you?
Yeah.
Okay, what has worked for me? So what has worked for me is like it's very helpful that you, because what are you really doing, right? Like, it depends what stage you are in your company, right? Like, but for people that are just starting off, right, they want to be an entrepreneur. The investor is not really necessarily investing in the business. I mean, he is like, you're clearly going to have to tell about your business, and he has to at least be interested. But that's really, like, honestly, probably 25% of it. 75% is actually about you and your team and your ability to execute. Because a startup success really comes down to really two things mostly. It's actually timing, like the timing of like when your product's coming to market and if the market's ready for something of whatever you're building, and when you're like going into it, and then your execution as a team. So what are you trying to sell to the investor? Like, so when I go to an investor, I try and portray, I've been an entrepreneur before. This is like something that we've done together. My team and I are very well built in the sense that we complement each other's skill sets, right? I'm more on this business end, and this is what I focus on, marketing, and then our tech guy does this, and our design does this, and this is the stuff that we've built in the past. This is who we work with. So you're trying to communicate traction about yourself, right? And you can spin the story however you want, because at the end of the day, what are you doing? You're trying to sell someone to give you capital for your business.
That's right.
And it's a risky ass investment. And he knows that too. But the thing is, like, if you hedge his risk in the sense saying, well, this is a startup, so this is risky, but I'm not going to like take your money and just spend it like an idiot, right? You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to go in there and take your $100,000 and blow it on one commercial at 8 p.m. on like a Thursday night, trying to sell my products, right? Because that is like what you're ultimately trying to convince the investor of. And it also depends on the stage of investor, there's a big psychological game, right? I honestly like really think it's very similar to, when you're kind of trying to attract a mate, right? If you're like overly aggressive with an investor in the sense like, you're showing like, you're like, oh, please give me money. Like I need it. Like you're needy, not interested. Right. And it's very similar in that realm as well. When you're trying to attract a girl. So it all comes down to the psychology. It's not just sometimes like, I think raising money is not just about, are you a good entrepreneur or a business? And to an extent, some businesses are. If your business really pops off and you're spitting out $500K a month profit, then yeah, you're easily going to raise money. But at that point, you're already in a different ballgame. But I'm saying when you're just getting started and you're trying to convince people, listen, this is my plan for my business. This is what I'm going to do, X, Y, and Z. I ran a beta test. This is the numbers that I got. That's what they want to see. But even more so to that, I would recommend people studying the human psychology of dealing with people, because there is like this whole like other element to it that isn't really necessarily talked about as much, because you're in a game and you only really know that game once you're actually raising money and you're in that game, right?
Right. It's a dance. That's why people bring on somebody who's done that before, brought on, convince investors to invest. It's a delicate balance, and it's a skill. So
let's go back to a common thing that we hear quite often from our community and our audience is, when you're first starting to build a product or you have an idea, you go to an investor, you always hear the threat of, did I ask for enough money? Is this going to supplement me for long enough? What's a typical amount when you first go and ask an investor for a lump sum of money? Is it $100,000? Is it $50,000? Is it $500,000? Like what is a respectable amount that you should be typically asking an investor if you're looking to build your next dream project or get onto a next application?
Yeah. So the way I would look at it is this, right? So you really want to build something like, if you can build it by yourself, at least maybe with one or two other people, say like the first thing that you should do, like say that I'm like a brand new newbie entrepreneur. I don't really have that much money.
Yeah.
And the first thing I would do is like, I go and do like a friends and family round, probably like say I raised like $20,000, right? Something like that. Or I was able to convince some sort of like investor that's like through a mutual connection, like 20 grand, whatever it is. I build this like a product that I can at least put out to market so I can test it out, right? Because if you're a first time entrepreneur, it's going to be very hard for you to raise money without doing so. But once, if you do that and you have some early traction and now you're talking to other investors, or you are an entrepreneur that's done stuff in the past, typically you want to raise money for 12 to 18 months if possible, right? But you want to be very this is the thing, like this is where entrepreneurs like screw themselves, right? Because you end up saying that I only need $100,000 when really in your mind you're like, I really need like 500,000.
Yeah.
Because then what happens? You only raise 100,000, and then you're 5 months in, and you're like, well, I was totally wrong, you know. Yeah. And that's the problem. So with that being said, you also don't want to get too greedy and just be like, well, I need 3 million, because then it's like you're never going to raise that round. So you know, and I've done both. Like honestly, in my life, like not necessarily that I raised the money, but I've literally been like, okay, that was dumb, and then now I'm paying for that now, you know. So, but you learn these things as you go. So you really have to be honest with yourself. It's like, okay, what do I absolutely need to run a very lean operation here, but get like the next step, right? Because you shouldn't be thinking like, you know, in your business, what is like, you know, how do I make this business $1 billion business tomorrow? You should look at like, what is the next step I need? Okay, I've raised, say you do raise your $500,000. Okay, what do I need to raise my Series A of like 5 million or $10 million, right? Okay, I need 1 million or 2 million users. I need a 50%, you know, retention. I need X, Y, and Z to happen in revenue, whatever it is. That's what you should be setting your OKRs to, objective key results, right? Because if you like shoot for the moon on day one, you're likely going to fail. Like, you know, it's just very rare.
Especially if you haven't proved yourself, as you said, Dan, early on. Like, if you never built a company, it's never made any money. You know, I think you're almost hooped if you shoot for the stars and try and get as much as you possibly can. You know, I've seen this in early entrepreneurship. I've seen people trying to raise money and never get the, you know, the results that they want because they've asked for too much. Yeah,
that, and then also yeah, I mean, it's just a thing. It's like you're setting yourself up sometimes for failure if you do these types of things, because you don't even get started in the first place, right? So like you have to really think it through, and you find that perfect like harmony balance, right? And I think, you know, to go back into a point that you guys just mentioned earlier, you know, about like, you know, best way to meet investors or something along the lines, because that's actually the very challenging thing. It's you can't just send a cold pitch deck to, I mean, all these investors can say that, that sure, do that, but honestly, don't do that, right? It's like, it's a very, it's a waste of time. And then like, you know, they get so much deal flow in, like they're like, if this person has to send me a cold pitch, he's not worth it, right? At the time. So you have to find the best intro is a warm intro, right? Or you can maybe develop a relationship with someone in the sense like, you know, cold email them or something. I mean, unless it's like a guy like Mark Cuban, because you can cold email Mark and Mark will reply to you if as long as it's a good email. But you can do that to some people. But I'm saying that for the majority of investors, especially that work at big VC firms and things like that, if you send someone a cold email, they're not going to really, you know, take you very seriously. If you develop maybe a rapport with them, like, hey, you know, I enjoyed your article or whatever this, you find out about them and you figure out a way to kind of hack that, like, you know, connection, or you figure out a mutual connection. That's actually the best connection that you can possibly make is to talk or is to get an entrepreneur that they've already invested in that's doing well to make an intro for you, because now you have this social validation of like, well, X, Y, and Z entrepreneur is like, I trust him, and he says that his friend is doing the next best thing, and he must be sick too. At that point, you'll get the meeting. And once you develop the relationship, now you have a relationship with them. So now, you know, the hundreds of investors I've talked to, I have relationships with all of them. So when the next business I do or next round I raise, I can just email them like, hey, like I'm raising my next round.
Wow. Cool.
If you're interested, whatever. And I have that network now, right? Because that's really what you're trying to build. Because there's like, you know, as much as VCs and all these investors say that there's not this like wall that's up, there totally is a wall that's up. You know,
I want to ask. I know we've kind of gone a little bit off topic here, but the information you're giving us, Daniel, is excellent. A lot of our audience is good. I think is going to really respond to what you're telling us, because no one talks about this, right? So I wanted to ask you one other question. So what is the percentage typically when you're asking for your first round of investment that an entrepreneur should realistically have at their back of their mind that they should give up when they go for their first raise?
It depends. I wouldn't say there's like a magic formula in the sense of, you know, this exact percentage, but I would say, you know, 15 to 30% is pretty common.
Very, very common. 15 to 30%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another question, you and this is sort of an aside, you mentioned Mark Cuban. Now I'd seen, you sort of looked up to Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban was one of your heroes as an entrepreneur, built himself up through the tech industry. What was it like bringing on Mark as a consultant? Because I understand you brought him on with MobileX as a business consultant.
So Mark was an advisor to MobileX, and then he actually became an investor in Native most recently. So it was pretty surreal because I went to IU as well, right? So we went to the same college, and he's like very well known, and you're like you look up to the guy, and then suddenly the whole story was that our head of business development at my company now is he was like graduating college, and he was like I have a relationship with Mark, right? So this goes back to what I was saying, right? He created a relationship with Mark, just sending him emails and like kind of just continuing and hustling, right? And developing a rapport with this guy. And when he graduated school, he's like, hey, I know Mark. I think Mark would be interested in meeting you. And then he made the intro, right? And then Mark agreed to be an advisor. But it was for that, but if it wasn't for like the companies I had started in college, I wouldn't have met this guy that, introduced me to Mark, and Mark wouldn't have been my advisor and all those things. So one thing leads to another. But I think that's, everything's possible, right? Sometimes people are just afraid to even email someone like Mark Cuban to even try, right? Yeah. So I think you just have to go after it, right, and do that.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people just don't do, which is for me is I just have a hard time understanding, right? Waiting is not a reaction; it's resisting. And I think a lot of people just have the fear of resisting, or they haven't been properly trained, or they just don't have the resilience to go out there and go do it. And that's 95% of it is taking action to go after your dreams.
Exactly.
Yeah. So at the age of 15, you started your first company. That business did over, $2 million by the age of 20. You now have multiple companies that you're working on that have generated over $60 million. People like you, Dan, aren't born. Let's be honest, right? Like, who inspired you to be who you are today?
I think it's not that like, I have a lot of people that I read about that inspire me, right? It was like, I think as I've gotten older, I've actually like changed a lot of things of why I did things, right? When I was younger, a lot of the things that I was doing was totally based on, just making money, because I thought that was the most important thing in life, right? And as I've gotten older, I think I've realized more and more that, money is nice to have, but it's not like what really is empowering me, right? So when I look at people that really have changed the world in a certain way, or like changed the way of how we communicate with each other or something, had this big footprint in the world, whether it be someone like, an incredible entrepreneur like Steve Jobs or someone like that, but also people that have just had incredible movements, right, and have accomplished like incredible feats, whether it be someone like Martin Luther King, right? So I read a lot about these type of stories of people doing incredible things, because we limit ourselves so much in our day-to-day life, and we listen to what society wants to tell us as what is right and how we should live. I think that while everything's portrayed as like, okay, if you have money, you're successful or whatever. To me, the big thing that it inspires me are the people that really, they set on an idea, and then they created something that, affected 100 or 1 billion people, and they saw the biggest problems in the world. And when people told them like, okay, it's crazy that for you to try and do that, but then 20 years later, they stayed with it, and then they impacted the entire world in that way, then those are the type of things that inspire me now, so that kind of answers your question, right, hopefully.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's great. And what are some of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome throughout your journey of entrepreneurship?
Man, dude, every day is a challenge. I feel like the thing about entrepreneurship, like the biggest challenge is just to have your headspace in a clear way, because what's messed up about it is like, the way that we live today is like, from the outside, everyone thinks like, that you're super successful, right? Everything that you're doing is always awesome and great. And really, like, an entrepreneur's life is this, right? You're like constantly like, my life is a roller coaster every day, where one day is amazing, other day I'm like, I'm screwed, and then other days, and it really takes an emotional toll on you, right? Because you're like constantly, your feelings are going up, and then you question yourself, and then you don't question yourself, and you have to just remain remain in this like positive headspace. And I think that that's the biggest thing that, Warren Buffett even says, the difference between a successful person and a non-successful person or is not necessarily how smart they are, right? It's not an intelligence, it's their emotional intelligence to be able to deal with the feelings and the roller coasters along the way. And I think that that's what my biggest thing is, or my biggest challenge, along with, I know, several other entrepreneurs. And something that's not really that talked about a lot, but I think that that's the thing that most people face, because with social media and how we do things, like I don't like portray my setbacks on my social media, because I hate when people do that anyways. But like, I'm not going to do that and be like, yeah, this is like where I fucked up. Maybe you can do it in a polite way every once in a while, but people only see the success. So you're really only seeing one side of the facade. And then what ends up happening to people is they compare themselves. And then now your ego's getting involved in this. And then now it's like this huge like emotional thing. So it all goes back to like getting your mind into the right headspace. Because that is really, I feel like, between all the really successful people I've met, the people that are billionaires, people that raised $100 million in capital, have 500,000 employees, the underlying factor, I would say 75-80% of them are very in tune with their like emotional well-being, whether they meditate every day or relatively spiritual or like whatever, because it's just a lot of fucking pressure that you have to deal with on an everyday basis, and you have to like keep it under control and make the right decisions. And if you allow it to overtake you, then you can't. You end up messing up, and you make the wrong decisions.
And what advice for some young entrepreneurs that you would suggest, Daniel? How do you handle that roller coaster? Like, what are some of the things that you do to handle that journey?
Yeah,
you mentioned emotional. You mentioned spiritual. Any piece of advice that you would suggest for that young entrepreneur that's going through the same hurdles and struggles?
Yeah. So the biggest things that I do, I started meditating every day. Like I have like a morning routine. Like I wake up and, unless I'm running absolutely so late for whatever I have to do that day, I'll take like, 10, 15 minutes just to meditate and get in my own headspace, like, and be in tune with myself. I also do like a gratitude journal, because that's the big thing, right? As an entrepreneur, you get shut down over and over and over again. And, you just all these things are always constantly falling apart. And it's very easy for you to really get down on yourself. But, if you really, I do this one exercise outside of like, there's this thing called a 5-minute journal. I totally recommend anyone doing it. Yep. But there's this other exercise that can be very helpful, that can get you in the right headspace in just about a minute, right? So if you kind of go through, your day, your morning practice, whatever you're doing, right? Just your regular routine. So say mine on Monday would be, okay, I wake up, I brush my teeth, I go to work, I have a meeting, I have to do this, I have to do that, so you just go through and you say, I have to, right? And then you do the same list and then you say, I get to, right? Like I get to wake up, I get to go brush my teeth, I get to go to work, I get to have an investor meeting. And then you say, do a third one. It's like, I'm blessed to wake up, and I'm blessed to go brush my teeth, and I'm blessed to go work out, and I'm blessed to. Well, you'll see if you actually do that exercise very well, and I sped through it, that your power of your words and the way that they're coming out of your mouth, it's like the first ones, I have to, you have very negative, and then you have a very positive tone when you say I blessed to, because what you realize is, you have the capability of seeing and perceiving and like thinking through problems is a very big blessing, because so many people can't even get that straight, right? And then because like you'll walk around the street, and like yesterday I was like kind of pissed about something, and I saw this like lady who was like blind, like walking, and I'm like, well, I don't have that problem, and then that in itself, like that moment of like having that gratitude for life, allows you to think through the problem that you're actually having and finding a solution to it. And many times it has saved me in my, making like rash decisions based off of my emotional, like taking past that. Right?
So I'm going to throw you a curveball here. I'm going to leave this with our last question, Dan, before we end the show. You're stuck on a deserted island. You're stranded. You're relying on that one person or one key characteristic to get you home. What would that be? What is that one characteristic you'd look for in a person to get you home?
Okay, so one key characteristic for a person to get me home.
Yeah. Save your life, get you home.
I want to find a better word for this. It's just like utter like trust, I guess, what I'm saying, like reliability or something, because like it's like, for example, like how I feel on certain people that I work with, like my co-founder, for example, like I have the utmost trust in him, right? Like I can feel like I can open up all of my private, like my bank accounts, everything, and I can know that I can trust him to always at least he will definitely try his hardest to do whatever I ask him to do if we absolutely need it, even if it's like detrimental to his own health or whatever, to get us past like a problem or situation. And I think that the reason we have an incredible relationship together, in the company is because of that. So, I mean, that's exactly the thing I would want to see in an island too, where I'm just like, I know that this person would not like, double cross me, right? It's like we have this utmost trust and respect for one another, right?
And when you bring on employees in your organization, I mean, what are the values you really look for? I mean, certainly, goals, goal oriented, want to grow within the business with you, but is it trust? Is that your number one thing? Do you really want to bring on somebody that you fully trust?
The things that I look for in a person in hiring is, it's two things. I want to make culture is very important to our company, right? And we have like trust is a part of it in the sense, but it's like also the desire to improve, right? I think is that one of the things. Like for example, we've done like we could do unlimited work, like PTO. We do unlimited work from homes. Like we don't have like policies around these things really, and everything's just based on improving. Like if you're like meeting your work and you're doing incredible things, like we want the company's culture is the most important thing that you can build on a company is the culture behind it and the people behind it. So I want at the end of the day, this is just a job, but I want them to look at our company as more like a family and not necessarily just a job, right? Because that creates this like really great workplace because people like where they come and work. So when we're hiring people, I'm thinking of people like, what is the biggest challenge that you've overcome, or what inspires you? Like, what do you ultimately want to do? And it doesn't have to be, I want to be a front end developer for the rest of my life. If you want to go write political campaign speeches, that's great. I honestly empower that. So people that can like do that dream for more is ultimately what I want to hire for.
Okay. Well, Dan, I know you're a busy man. You have some investor meetings to go to here. Thanks so much for your time. This is Landon Hood, Rory McMillan, Dan Novias, entrepreneur, doing big things, going big places. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks so much,
thanks
Dan.
for having me, guys.
Thank you.
Later, brother.